The rain had turned Seoul's streets into rivers of neon light. Baek Mu-jin stepped from his black Mercedes, designer shoes untouched by the downpour as his bodyguard held an umbrella overhead. He was here for business, the kind that ended with broken bones and wire transfers, the kind that kept his empire running like clockwork. Then he saw her. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, standing alone on the corner, soaked through, pink backpack hanging crooked on tiny shoulders, hair plastered to her face, eyes wide with terror and something else, determination. She didn't run when she saw him. Everyone ran from Baek Mu-jin, businessmen, rival gangs. Even police officers crossed the street when they spotted the ghost of Seoul. But this child walked straight toward him. Her small hand reached up, tugging his expensive coat with desperate fingers. "Ajeossi," she whispered, voice breaking through the rain. "Please, can you walk me home? I'm so scared." Every muscle in his body froze. His lieutenant's hand moved toward his weapon. His driver's eyes went wide with disbelief. Because in 25 years of ruling Seoul's underworld, no one, absolutely no one, had ever approached Baek Mu-jin asking for protection. Especially not a 6-year-old girl, with tears streaming down her face. Her name was Yoo Ah-reum, 6 years old, born in the heart of Seoul's Gangnam district, where glass towers touched the sky and darkness hid in plain sight, where children learned to bow politely and never make eye contact with dangerous men, where mothers clutched their daughters close and fathers worked themselves to death just to survive. Ah-reum lived with her parents in a small apartment on the edge of the luxury district. Her father drove a taxi 16 hours a day. Her mother cleaned offices in buildings that cost more per square foot than their entire year's rent. They loved her with everything they had, but love doesn't stop predators from choosing their prey. For 2 weeks, Ah-reum had been telling her parents about the man, how he waited near her after-school academy every evening, how he followed her down the subway stairs, how he knew her schedule even though she'd never spoken to him. "He always smiles at me, Appa," she'd whispered one night, picking at her rice. "But his smile makes my stomach hurt." Her father had reported it to the police. Officer Kim took notes, nodded sympathetically, explained that without evidence of direct contact or explicit threats, they couldn't investigate. "Children have active imaginations, Mr. Yoo. Sometimes they misinterpret friendly adults." The academy director, Mrs. Park, was equally dismissive. "Perhaps Ah-reum is seeking attention. Perhaps she's struggling with the pressure of her studies." But Ah-reum knew what she saw. The man wasn't friendly. He was hunting. Baek Mu-jin had built his empire on reading people in microseconds, body language, micro-expressions. The subtle tells that separated liars from truth-tellers, threats from opportunities. This child was genuinely terrified, and she'd chosen him, of all people, as salvation. His driver, Kim Tae-sung, whispered urgently behind him, "Boss, we're late for the meeting with the Port Authority, if we don't." "Reschedule it," Mu-jin said quietly, never taking his eyes off Ah-reum. "But boss," "I said reschedule it." The tone left no room for argument. Mu-jin knelt slowly in the rain, his cold eyes meeting hers. And in that moment, something he'd buried for decades began to crack open. "Why aren't you safe, little one?" She pointed with a trembling finger across the street. A man stood in the shadows, watching, waiting, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a predator's patience. Mu-jin's blood went ice cold, because he recognized that face, Lee Sang-woo, a human trafficker he'd refused to do business with 3 times, a man who saw children as inventory. The little girl's voice broke again. "He's been following me for days. I just want to get home without him watching me." Mu-jin stood, his massive frame casting a shadow over the small, shivering child. He took her cold hand in his. "What's your name, little one?" "Yoo Ah-reum," she whispered. "Well, Ah-reum, no one will hurt you now." Mu-jin adjusted his grip on Ah-reum's small hand, gently, like holding something precious and breakable, and began walking down the rain-slicked street. His crew followed at a discreet distance, hands near weapons, eyes scanning every shadow. "Where do you live, Ah-reum?" Mu-jin asked, his voice surprisingly soft. "Near Yeoksum Station, the old building with the broken sign." Her voice trembled. "But I don't know if I should go back. The bad man might be there." "Tell me about this bad man." As they walked, Ah-reum explained. The stalking. Her parents' deaths 3 days ago, hiding in the closet. The men's words about merchandise. With each sentence, Mu-jin's jaw tightened imperceptibly. His mind assembled the picture with ruthless clarity. This wasn't random violence. This was acquisition, eliminating guardians to harvest a vulnerable child. Lee Sang-woo's signature strategy. "Have you eaten today, little one?" Ah-reum shook her head. "Yesterday." Another head shake. Something ancient and furious stirred in Mu-jin's chest. A memory of another little girl, 25 years ago, who'd gone 3 days without food before she was taken. His sister. The reason he'd built this empire in the first place. He pulled out his phone and made a call that would change everything. "Jae-hoon, cancel all meetings for the next 72 hours. I need a full background check on Lee Sang-woo's recent activities." They arrived at Ah-reum's building just as the rain intensified. The structure loomed dark and silent, half the windows boarded up, the lobby light flickering weakly. Mu-jin's instincts screamed danger. "Which floor?" "Third, apartment 3B. Mu-jin gestured to his men. 2 stayed with the car. 2 flanked the entrance. He and his lieutenant, Han Jae-hoon, escorted Ah-reum inside. The stairwell smelled of mildew and decay. Somewhere above, a pipe dripped endlessly. Ah-reum's hand tightened around Mu-jin's as they climbed. The apartment door hung slightly ajar. Mu-jin positioned Ah-reum behind him, his hand moving to the pistol beneath his jacket. Jae-hoon drew his weapon smoothly, professionally. They entered in synchronized silence, clearing each room with military precision. The apartment was small, modest furniture. Family photos on the walls, Ah-reum smiling between her parents. A life interrupted mid-sentence. But what made Mu-jin's blood run cold was what he found in the bedroom. A camera, small and professional, mounted in the corner. Recording equipment. Surveillance that had been watching this family for weeks. "Boss," Jae-hoon whispered, pointing to the window. Fresh scratches around the lock. Someone had been practicing entry, preparing. This wasn't opportunistic crime. This was systematic hunting, and Ah-reum had been the target all along. Mu-jin returned to the living room where Ah-reum waited, her small face pale with exhaustion and fear. "You're not staying here tonight," he said gently. "Pack a bag, anything you need." The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of one of Gangnam's most exclusive buildings. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the glittering cityscape. Marble floors, minimalist furniture that cost more than most people's annual salary. Ah-reum stood in the entrance, dripping rainwater onto imported Italian tile, her eyes wide with wonder and confusion. "This is where you live," she whispered. "Sometimes." Mu-jin gestured to an older woman emerging from the kitchen. "Mrs. Kang will help you. She's trustworthy." Mrs. Kang, his housekeeper of 15 years, took one look at the soaked child, and her expression transformed from professional detachment to grandmother warmth. "Oh, you poor thing. Let's get you into dry clothes and find you something to eat." As Mrs. Kang led Ah-reum away, Mu-jin stood alone in his pristine living room, watching Seoul's lights blur through rain-streaked windows. His phone buzzed. Jae-hoon. "Boss, preliminary findings on Lee Sang-woo. He's escalated operations in the past 6 months. We're finding patterns, 17 missing children, all ruled as runaways or accidents. All families either dead or too terrified to speak." Mu-jin's grip tightened on the phone. "Locations. All within our territory. He's been operating under our nose, targeting the vulnerable while we focused on traditional operations." The implications hit like a physical blow. While Mu-jin had been managing ports and construction contracts, predators had been harvesting children in neighborhoods he claimed to control. His power meant nothing if innocents couldn't sleep safely. 30 minutes later, Ah-reum emerged from the guest room wearing clothes Mrs. Kang had found an oversized t-shirt that hung like a dress, her hair wrapped in a towel. She looked impossibly small in the enormous penthouse. Mrs. Kang had prepared food, rice, soup, side dishes arranged with care. Ah-reum sat at the dining table, eating slowly at first, then with increasing desperation. 3 days of hunger finally being satisfied. Mu-jin watched from the doorway, something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. When was the last time he'd felt protective of anything beyond his organization? When had violence and strategy stopped being his only languages? Ajeossi, Ah-reum said quietly, looking up from her bowl. Why did you help me? Everyone says you're scary. The question caught him off guard. He moved to the table, sitting across from her, this impossibly brave child who'd approached a monster and found protection. I am scary, he said honestly. To people who deserve fear, but you don't deserve fear, Ah-reum, you deserve safety. My parents used to say that too, that I deserve to be safe. Her eyes filled with tears. But they're gone now, and the bad man is still out there. Mu-jin leaned forward, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. The bad man will never touch you, I promise you this. She studied his face with a child's directness. You mean it, really mean it. I never make promises I can't keep. Ah-reum nodded slowly, believing him with the absolute trust only children possess. Then she yawned, exhaustion finally overwhelming fear. While Ah-reum slept in the guest room, Mu-jin assembled his core team in his study. Han Jae-hoon, his right hand. Park Min-seo, his intelligence specialist. Kim Young-ho, his connection to legitimate business and law enforcement. And Lee Sung-min, his most dangerous enforcer. Tell me about Lee Sang-woo, Mu-jin commanded. Min-seo opened a tablet, displaying surveillance photos and documents. Age 42, operates 3 front companies, import-export, real estate, private education consulting, all legitimate on paper, all covering trafficking operations. How long has he been in our territory? 18 months. He approached you 3 times for partnership, each time you refused. Mu-jin remembered. Sang-woo had offered lucrative deals, shared territories, mutual profit. But trafficking children crossed a line Mu-jin wouldn't approach, regardless of money. He took that refusal as permission, Mu-jin said quietly. Assumed if I wouldn't work with him, I wouldn't interfere either. Young-ho nodded. He's been careful, targeting families with no connections, no power to fight back. Police classify them as accidents or runaways. Cases closed within days. Show me the pattern. Min-seo displayed a map of Seoul, red dots marking each disappearance. All clustered in neighborhoods Mu-jin's organization claimed to control. All happening while he'd been focused on other priorities. 17 children in 18 months, Sung-min said, his voice tight with controlled rage. And we didn't know. The weight of that failure settled on Mu-jin's shoulders like physical mass. His empire was built on information, control, territory, and he'd been blind. That night, alone in his bedroom, Mu-jin opened a drawer he hadn't touched in years. Inside, a single photograph, faded, worn from handling. A young girl, maybe 12, smiling at the camera. His sister, Min-young. 25 years ago, Mu-jin had been 15, powerless, poor, living in Seoul's slums with his mother, father, and younger sister. His father worked construction. His mother cleaned houses. They survived barely. Then the men came. They'd watched Min-young for weeks, just like Sang-woo watched Ah-reum. They knew her schedule, her route to school, her family's weakness. And one afternoon, she simply disappeared. Mu-jin had searched frantically. His father had borrowed money from loan sharks, offering everything for information. His mother had walked the streets for months, showing Min-young's photo to everyone. Nothing. The police filed reports but never investigated. Children from poor neighborhoods disappeared sometimes. That was just how the world worked. His mother died 2 years later, grief eating her from inside. His father drank himself to death within another year, and Mu-jin, 17 and completely alone, made a choice. He would never be powerless again. He'd started as muscle for low-level gangs, proved himself ruthless, intelligent, strategic, rose through ranks with calculated violence and absolute loyalty, built an empire where he controlled everything, where no one could take what was his. But in becoming powerful, he'd become hollow. The boy who'd loved his sister had died the day she was taken. What remained was efficient, cold, unstoppable. Until tonight, until a 6-year-old girl asked him to make her feel safe. Morning arrived with Seoul's typical efficiency. The city waking, traffic building, life continuing despite individual tragedies. Ah-reum emerged from the guest room, still wearing the oversized t-shirt, her hair tousled from sleep. She found Mu-jin standing at the window, already dressed in another expensive suit, phone pressed to his ear. He ended the call when he saw her. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded. "Better than I have in days. Your bed is really soft." Mrs. Kang appeared with breakfast, warm milk, toast, fruit cut into small pieces. Ah-reum ate quietly while Mu-jin watched Seoul's morning unfold below them. "Ajeossi," Ah-reum said suddenly. "What happens now? Can I go back to school? Will the bad man still be there?" Mu-jin turned from the window, kneeling to her eye level, a gesture that had become almost natural overnight. "I'm working on making sure you're completely safe, but I need you to tell me everything you remember, about the man who followed you, about the night your parents died. Can you do that?" Ah-reum's small face grew serious, older than her 6 years. "Will it help stop him?" "Yes." "Okay, I'll tell you everything." And she did. For the next hour, with breaks when memories became too painful, Ah-reum described every detail. The man's face. His car dark blue, expensive. The words she'd heard the night her parents died. The feeling of being watched for weeks. Mu-jin recorded it all, his mind assembling pieces of a larger picture. This wasn't just about Ah-reum. This was systematic operation targeting multiple children. That afternoon, Min-seo arrived with findings that made Mu-jin's blood run cold. "Boss, we identified why Ah-reum specifically was targeted." He displayed medical records on his tablet. "Her blood type is O-negative, extremely rare in Korea, less than 0.5% of the population. In certain markets, children with rare blood types command premium prices." Mu-jin's hands clenched into fists. She was merchandise before she was even taken. "Yes, Sang-woo runs a sophisticated operation. He identifies high-value targets, rare blood types, specific physical characteristics, ages matching client preferences. Then he eliminates obstacles and acquires the product." The clinical language made Mu-jin sick. These were children, not products. Lives, not inventory. How many others? "Based on the pattern, we estimate Sang-woo has successfully trafficked 17 children in 18 months. Current active targets, at least 5 more." Mu-jin stood, his decision crystallizing. "Find them. Every child he's watching. I want names, addresses, families. We're not just protecting Ah-reum anymore. We're shutting down his entire operation." Jae-hoon exchanged glances with the other lieutenants. "Boss, that's declaring war on a network larger than Sang-woo alone. He has connections to international syndicates, corrupt officials, wealthy clients. This could destabilize everything we've built." "Then we rebuild," Mu-jin said quietly. "On better foundations. Foundations that don't allow children to be hunted in our territory while we look the other way." The room fell silent, because everyone understood what this meant. Mu-jin wasn't just protecting one child. He was choosing a side in a war that would cost them everything. That evening, Ah-reum found Mu-jin in his study, surrounded by documents and surveillance photos. She stood in the doorway, uncertain. "Can I ask you something, Ajeossi?" "Of course." "Why is everyone scared of you?" Her voice was genuinely curious, not accusatory. Mu-jin considered lying, simplifying, but this child had trusted him with her life. She deserved honesty. "Because I've done things that make people afraid. I've hurt people who tried to hurt me. I've built power through violence and fear." "But you're not scary to me," Ah-reum said softly. You make me feel safe. Those words hit harder than any bullet, because no one had ever associated Mu-jin with safety. Fear, yes. Respect, absolutely. But safety, that belonged to fathers and teachers and police officers. Not to ghosts who ruled Seoul's underworld. Maybe, Mu-jin said carefully, people can be more than one thing, scary to some, safe to others. Ah-reum walked into the study, picking up one of the photos on his desk, a surveillance image of Lee Sang-woo. Is this the bad man? Yes. Are you going to hurt him? The question hung in the air. Mu-jin had built his empire on violence. Every problem had been solved with force, intimidation, calculated brutality. It was the only language he'd spoken fluently for 25 years. But looking at this 6-year-old girl, he realized she wasn't asking him to hurt Sang-woo. She was asking him to make her safe. There was a profound difference. I'm going to stop him, Mu-jin said finally, from ever hurting another child. Ah-reum nodded, satisfied. Good, because hurting people doesn't make things better. My Iyama used to say that. She left the study, returning to Mrs. Kang and cartoons on television. And Mu-jin sat alone, wondering when a 6-year-old had become wiser than a 46-year-old mafia boss. The next morning brought fractures within Mu-jin's organization. His core lieutenants gathered in the penthouse conference room, 10 men who'd built Seoul's most powerful criminal empire alongside him. But unity was cracking. Boss, we need to discuss the situation, said Choi De-young, his logistics coordinator. Protecting one child is admirable, but you're talking about dismantling an entire trafficking network. That has implications. What kind of implications? The kind where other organizations see us as unstable, emotional, led by a boss who makes decisions based on sentiment rather than strategy. Park Yi-won, his financial officer, nodded. Sang-woo's network has connections to Chinese triads, Japanese yakuza, Russian syndicates. If we move against him, we're potentially declaring war on international operations. That affects our business, our safety, our future. Mu-jin listened silently, his expression unreadable. Han Jae-hoon, his most loyal lieutenant, finally spoke. With respect to my brothers here, I disagree. Our business is built on reputation. What's our reputation worth if children are trafficked in our territory while we do nothing? It's one child, De-young countered. One tragic situation, we can't save everyone. No, Mu-jin said quietly, standing. We can't save everyone, but we can save these children, in our territory, under our watch. And if that makes us seem emotional or unstable to other organizations, then perhaps they need to reconsider what strength actually means. He looked at each man in turn. I'm not ordering anyone to follow. This is my decision, my fight, but I'm asking who stands with me. Jae-hoon stood immediately. Always boss. Sung-min rose next. Children are off limits, that's the code. One by one, 7 of the 10 lieutenants stood. 3 remained seated, De-young, Yi-won, and Lee Kang-ho. Then we part ways, Mu-jin said simply. No hard feelings, take your shares and go. That afternoon, a package arrived at the penthouse. No return address, hand-delivered by anonymous courier. Inside, a small box, and inside that box, something that made even Mu-jin's iron control waver. A child's finger, small, fresh, belonging to a victim no older than 8. The note was brief. Return my merchandise within 24 hours or I start sending pieces publicly. You have 1 day to remember your place, Ghost. Children are business, not pets. SW. Jae-hoon found Mu-jin standing motionless in his study, the box on his desk, his hands clenched white-knuckled. Boss. He killed a child to send a message to me. The words came out hollow, barely controlled rage beneath. What are your orders? Mu-jin looked up, and Jae-hoon saw something in those eyes he'd never witnessed before. Not anger, not calculation, but something rower. Grief, fury, purpose. Contact everyone. Every organization, every rival, every contact we have. I want a meeting, all of Seoul's underworld, tomorrow. What are you planning? I'm going to make them choose. Stand with us against trafficking or stand against us. No more neutrality, no more looking away. Jae-hoon understood immediately. Mu-jin wasn't just declaring war on Sang-woo. He was forcing Seoul's entire criminal infrastructure to take a position on one question. Were children off limits, or weren't they? That's a massive gamble, boss. Half of them might side with Sang-woo, profit over principle. Then we'll know who our real enemies are, Mu-jin said quietly, and we'll deal with them accordingly. He returned his gaze to the box on his desk. Another child who'd died while he'd been calculating strategy. Another Minyoung who'd never go home. No more. The meeting took place in a warehouse in Yongsan, neutral territory. 15 organizations represented. Crime bosses who'd spent decades carving Seoul into territories, each protecting their own interests, each maintaining careful balance. Mu-jin arrived with Jae-hoon and 4 bodyguards. Yoo Ah-reum stayed safely at the penthouse with Mrs. Kang and additional security. The warehouse was tense. These men didn't trust each other, but they respected the temporary truce necessary for such gatherings. Mu-jin walked to the center, his presence commanding immediate silence. Thank you for coming. I'll be direct. Lee Sang-woo runs a child trafficking operation in my territory. 17 children taken in 18 months. Families murdered. Evidence destroyed. And he operates with impunity because we've all looked the other way, assuming it doesn't affect our business. Several bosses shifted uncomfortably. Yesterday, he killed another child, cut off their finger, sent it to me with a message claiming children are business, not pets. Mu-jin's voice remained level, but the rage beneath was palpable. I'm declaring war on his network. Anyone who traffics children, anyone who profits from that trade, anyone who enables it, they're my enemy now. Kim Tae-hyun, boss of Seoul's Eastern District, spoke up. With respect, Baek, one man's principles don't dictate all our operations. Trafficking is profitable. Clients exist. Supply meets demand. Then you're my enemy too, Mu-jin said simply. The warehouse erupted, voices overlapping, some supporting Mu-jin, others defending their right to run whatever business they chose. Mu-jin let them argue for several minutes, then raised his hand. Silence fell. I'm not asking for unanimous agreement. I'm drawing a line. Children are off-limits in Seoul. Anyone who crosses that line answers to me personally. Choose your side now. 8 organizations stood with Mu-jin. 7 walked out, including Kim Tae-hyun and 2 other major bosses. Seoul's underworld had just fractured along philosophical lines, and everyone knew what came next: war, inevitable and bloody. Jae-hoon drove Mu-jin back to the penthouse in tense silence. We just made enemies of half the city's power structure, Jae-hoon finally said. We exposed who they always were, Mu-jin corrected. Better to know now than discover too late. Sang-woo will escalate, he has to. If he backs down, he looks weak. Let him escalate, we're ready. But readiness and confidence were different things. Mu-jin understood the mathematics. He just started a war with multiple fronts, against enemies who had resources, connections, and no moral restrictions. All to protect children he'd never met. Children like Yoo Ah-reum, who'd asked him to make her feel safe. When they arrived at the penthouse, Yoo Ah-reum was asleep on the couch, a cartoon frozen on the television screen. Mrs. Kang had covered her with a blanket. Mu-jin stood looking at her peaceful face, and something inside him finally settled. This was right. Whatever consequences came, whatever battles had to be fought, this was the first truly right thing he'd done in 25 years. Boss, Jae-hoon said quietly, for what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Even if it destroys everything we built. What we built doesn't matter if we lose our souls building it. Mu-jin nodded slowly. Perhaps there was hope for him yet. The next 2 days passed in careful preparation. Intelligence gathering, weapon acquisition, positioning assets. Mu-jin's organization transformed from business operation to military unit. Yoo Ah-reum, shielded from most of it, spent her days with Mrs. Kang, reading books, drawing pictures, slowly healing from trauma. But children are perceptive. She knew something important was happening. One evening, she found Mu-jin reviewing tactical maps in his study. Ajeossi, are you fighting the bad man soon? Mu-jin considered lying, protecting her innocence, but she'd already lost her parents to violence. She deserved truth. Yes, soon. Will you get hurt? I might. Fighting is dangerous. Ah-reum climbed onto the chair next to him, studying his face with serious eyes. My Iyama used to tell me a story about a tiger who was very fierce and scary. All the animals in the forest were afraid of him. What happened to the tiger? One day, a tiny mouse got trapped in thorns. The tiger could have eaten the mouse, but instead, the tiger helped free him. And after that, all the animals realized the tiger was fierce and kind. Being scary and being good aren't opposites. Mu-jin felt something catch in his throat. Your mother was wise. She was. Ah-reum's eyes filled with tears. I miss her so much. Without thinking, Mu-jin pulled the small girl into his arms, holding her while she cried. And for the first time in 25 years, he cried too. For Minyoung, for Ah-reum's parents, for all the innocence destroyed while he'd been focused on building an empire. When the tears finally stopped, Ah-reum looked up at him. Will you be careful when you fight? I'll try. Promise. I promise. She hugged him tightly, then returned to Mrs. Kang. And Mu-jin sat alone in his study, realizing he'd just been given something he thought he'd lost forever, a reason to survive beyond mere survival. The trap came on the 4th day. Min Seo received intelligence. Lee Sang-woo had another child, an 8-year-old boy named Park Min-jun. Sang-woo was moving him tonight, shipping him overseas within 12 hours. It's too convenient, Jae-hoon argued. Sang-woo knows we're looking for his operations. This information came too easily. Trap or not, we can't ignore it, Mu-jin said. If there's even a chance Min-jun is real, we have to move. He assembled a team. 12 men. Best fighters, most loyal. They moved on the warehouse in Incheon where Min-jun was reportedly held. The building was dark, industrial, surrounded by shipping containers. Perfect ambush terrain. Mu-jin's instincts screamed danger, but he pushed forward. Because if Min-jun was real, every minute mattered. They breached the warehouse with tactical precision. Found the boy immediately, bound, gagged, terrified but alive. Then the lights went out. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions. Sang-woo's men had been waiting. Mu-jin's team scattered, taking cover, returning fire in the darkness. Fall back, Mu-jin commanded. Get the boy out. Jae-hoon grabbed Min-jun, running for the exit. Mu-jin covered them, firing with calculated precision. His men moved as a unit, trained and professional. But they were outnumbered. Sang-woo had planned this perfectly. Mu-jin took a bullet to his shoulder. Pain exploded. He kept firing, kept moving. 2 of his men went down. Another was hit in the leg. They fought their way to the vehicles, loading the wounded, the boy, everyone they could save. Engines roared. Tires screamed. They escaped barely. 2 men lost. 5 wounded, including Mu-jin, but Min-jun was alive. As Jae-hoon drove them back to Seoul, Mu-jin clutched his bleeding shoulder and realized Sang-woo had sent a clear message. This war would cost everything. The doctor arrived at the penthouse within an hour. A man on Mu-jin's payroll, discreet and skilled. He extracted the bullet, stitched the wound, administered antibiotics. You were lucky, the doctor said. Another inch to the left, you'd have lost the arm. Mu-jin said nothing, his mind focused elsewhere. 2 men dead, for 1 child. The mathematics were brutal but necessary. Ah-reum found him after the doctor left, his arm in a sling, exhaustion written across his face. You got hurt, she said, her voice small. I'll be fine. Because of the bad man. Yes. She moved closer, gently touching the sling. Thank you for saving that boy. Min-jun, right? Mrs. Kang told me. We did what was necessary. My Iyama used to say that sometimes doing the right thing hurts, but it's still right. She looked up at him. You're a good person, Ajeossi, even if you don't think you are. After she left, Mu-jin sat alone in the darkness, those words echoing. A good person, he'd never considered himself good. Effective, yes. Powerful, absolutely. But good. Perhaps goodness wasn't about never doing wrong. Perhaps it was about choosing right when it mattered most, regardless of cost. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Sangwoo. You saved one, I have 3 more, different locations. You have 4 hours before they're moved internationally. You can't save them all. Choose, Ghost. Show Seoul what your principles are really worth. Mu-jin stared at the message, the impossible choice. He could maybe save 1 location in 4 hours, 2 if everything went perfectly, but 3, simultaneously, impossible. Unless he did something he'd never done in his entire life. Trust completely, delegate entirely, work collaboratively. He made 3 phone calls that would either save 3 children or destroy everything. The first call went to Kim Min-woo, a rival boss who'd stood with him at the warehouse meeting. Their organizations had been competitors for years, but they'd agreed on one principle. Children were off limits. I need your help, Mu-jin said simply. 3 children, 3 locations, 4 hours. Kim didn't hesitate. Send me 1 location, consider it done. The second call went to Detective Park Soo-young, a rare honest cop in Seoul's corrupted police force. They'd worked together before, unofficial arrangements where Mu-jin's intelligence helped solve cases the police couldn't touch. Detective Park, I'm calling in every favor you've ever owed me. What do you need, Baek? A child's life, maybe your career, definitely your trust. He sent her the second location. Traffickers are moving an 8-year-old girl in 3.5 hours. You hit that building with everything you have, arrest everyone inside, and I guarantee you'll crack the biggest trafficking case in Seoul's history. Silence on the line. Then, if you're lying to me. I'm not. Children's lives, detective. That's all that matters right now. Send me everything you have. I'll mobilize a team. The third call was the hardest. It went to Yoon Yi-sung, a boss who'd walked out of the warehouse meeting. A man who'd chosen profit over principle. A man who owed Mu-jin a blood debt from 5 years ago when Mu-jin had saved his son from a kidnapping. I'm calling in the debt, Mu-jin said when Yoon answered. The debt was paid years ago. No, you said you owed me your son's life. I'm collecting. There's a child at this location. You have 3 hours to get him out safely. After that, we're even. Another silence. Then Yoon's resigned voice. You're destroying the balance of this city, Baek. The balance was already broken. I'm just making it visible. Send the location. Mu-jin took the 4th location himself, the most dangerous one where Sangwoo would expect him, the trap within the trap. He assembled his remaining team, Jae-hoon and 8 men, some still bandaged from the previous night. This is it, Mu-jin told them. We don't come back without that child. They drove into the night, toward a warehouse in Songpa, knowing Sangwoo would be waiting. The Songpa warehouse was different, bigger, more security. Sangwoo wasn't just defending cargo anymore, he was making a statement. Mu-jin's team approached from 3 angles. Jae-hoon led the south entry. Sungmin took the north. Mu-jin, injured shoulder and all, went straight through the front. Because subtlety was over. This was about sending a message as much as saving the child. They breached simultaneously. Gunfire erupted immediately. But this time, Mu-jin's team was prepared, better positioned, fighting with purpose beyond survival, fighting for innocence that couldn't fight for itself. Mu-jin moved through the warehouse like a ghost, his pistol an extension of his will. He'd built his reputation on precision violence, and tonight he reminded Seoul why they called him the Ghost. He found the child in a back room, a girl, maybe 7, bound and terrified. Not Sangwoo's only victim, but the one Mu-jin could save tonight. I'm here to help, Mu-jin said gently, holstering his weapon and cutting her bonds. What's your name? Kim Soo-jin, she whispered. Well, Soo-jin, you're safe now, I promise. He lifted her carefully, his injured shoulder screaming protest. Behind him, his team was clearing the building. and somewhere in this warehouse, Sang-woo was watching. They met in the main floor. Sang-woo flanked by 4 men, all armed. Mu-jin carrying Soo-jin, Jae-hoon covering his back. "You can't win this, Ghost," Sang-woo said, his voice carrying across the empty space. "I have connections you can't imagine, resources beyond your reach. You're fighting an industry, not a man." "Then I'll burn the industry down," Mu-jin replied. "One child at a time." "Sentimental fool. You've sacrificed your empire for what? Moral superiority. These children are merchandise." "That's economics, not morality." Mu-jin shifted Soo-jin to Jae-hoon's arms, then took a step forward. "They're not merchandise. They're someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's future, and I'm done pretending otherwise." His phone buzzed, 3 messages, from Kim Min-woo, "Child secured." From Detective Park, "Girl safe, 15 arrests." From Yoon Yi-sung, "The boy is safe, we're even." Mu-jin looked at Sang-woo and smiled. "You said I couldn't save them all. You were wrong." Sang-woo's expression shifted from confidence to confusion to rage in seconds. "Impossible. 3 locations." "I didn't do it alone," Mu-jin interrupted. "That's what you never understood. This isn't about one man's power. It's about what we choose to protect together." Sang-woo raised his weapon. So did his men. Mu-jin's team responded instantly. The warehouse became a frozen tableau of mutual destruction. "You pull that trigger," Mu-jin said quietly, "and everyone dies, including you. Is that really how you want this to end?" "Better than surrender." "Who said anything about surrender?" Mu-jin gestured to the warehouse doors. They opened, flooding the space with light. Police cars, SWAT teams, Detective Park leading a full tactical response. "You think I came here just to save one child?" Mu-jin continued. "I came here to end you. Detective Park has been investigating your operation for months. I just gave her everything, your client lists, your financial records, your international connections. Everything my intelligence network has gathered." Sang-woo's face went pale. "You're exposing yourself too, your organization." "Is mine to sacrifice if necessary." Mu-jin stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. "You asked me to choose between my empire and my principles. I choose principles, every time." Detective Park's voice boomed through megaphones. "This is the Seoul Metropolitan Police. Drop your weapons. You're surrounded." Sang-woo looked around, at his men lowering their weapons, at the police closing in, at his empire collapsing in real time. Then he looked at Mu-jin with pure hatred. "You've destroyed everything. For what? These children will be forgotten in a week." "Not by me," Mu-jin said simply. "Never by me." Sang-woo and his men were arrested. The warehouse secured. 4 children saved in one night. And Mu-jin's organization would face consequences, police scrutiny, rival exploitation, internal instability. But as he watched Soo-jin reunite with her mother outside the warehouse, crying and holding each other, he knew he'd made the right choice. The aftermath took weeks to unfold. Detective Park's investigation exposed a trafficking network spanning 12 countries, hundreds of arrests, dozens of children recovered, politicians and businessmen implicated, Seoul's entire power structure shaken. Mu-jin's organization faced exactly what Jae-hoon had predicted: scrutiny, instability, enemies exploiting perceived weakness. 3 smaller gangs attempted to move into his territory. 2 rival bosses declared him compromised by sentiment. But something unexpected happened. The 8 organizations that had stood with him at the warehouse formed an alliance. Not for profit, but for principle. They established a new code. Trafficking of any kind, human, especially children, was grounds for unified retaliation. Seoul's underworld began changing, not into something good exactly, but into something less monstrous. Lines were drawn, standards established, and anyone who crossed them faced swift, absolute consequences. Kim Min-woo visited the penthouse one afternoon, 3 weeks after the raid. "You started something, Baek. Half the city thinks you're insane. The other half thinks you're a martyr." "I'm neither," Mu-jin said. "I'm just trying to fix what I broke." "Your territory." My soul. Kim nodded slowly. The alliance is solid. We've identified 17 other trafficking operations in Seoul. We're systematically dismantling them. Collateral damage. Some, but we're saving children. That's what matters. After Kim left, Mu-jin stood at his window overlooking Seoul. The city looked the same, glass and neon and endless motion. But something fundamental had shifted. Not the city itself, but how he saw it. Every light was a home. Every home had families. Every family had children who deserved safety. He couldn't save them all, but he could damn well try. The final confrontation came in court. Lee Sang-woo's trial became Seoul's most publicized case in decades. International media, human rights organizations, families of recovered children demanding justice. Mu-jin attended every day, sitting in the back row, silent witness to accountability. On the final day, the prosecution called Ah-reum to testify. She was small behind the witness stand, but her voice was steady. She described the man who'd followed her. The night her parents died, the words she'd heard about merchandise. Her testimony was devastating, precise, honest, unshakable. Sang-woo's lawyers tried to discredit her. She was young, traumatized, possibly coached. But Ah-reum didn't waver. She looked directly at Sang-woo and said something that silenced the courtroom. You took my parents. You took other children's families. You thought we were things you could buy and sell. But we're people. We matter. And even if you don't believe that, there are people who do. People who fight for us. She looked back at Mu-jin then and smiled. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty on all counts. Life imprisonment without possibility of parole. As Sang-woo was led away in chains, he looked at Mu-jin one final time. Was it worth it? Everything you sacrificed? Mu-jin thought about Min-jun and Soo-jin and Ah-reum, about the children recovered from trafficking networks across 12 countries, about the alliance formed to protect the innocent. Yes, he said simply, it was worth everything. 3 months later, Ah-reum stood outside her new school, wearing a clean uniform and carrying a backpack that fit properly. Her adoptive family, carefully vetted by Mu-jin's organization, waited nearby. Good people, safe people, people who would love her the way her parents had. She looked around nervously, old fears surfacing. Would someone be watching? Would she ever feel truly safe again? Then she saw him, Baek Mu-jin standing across the street by a black Mercedes, not approaching, not interfering, just present, watching over her from a distance. Their eyes met. He nodded once. She waved, smiling genuinely. And Mu-jin, the ghost of Seoul, the man who'd built an empire on violence and fear, smiled back. A real smile. The kind that reached his eyes. The kind he hadn't felt in 25 years. Because Ah-reum was safe now. Not because he walked beside her every day, but because he'd changed the world enough that she could walk safely on her own. Her adoptive mother called. Ah-reum waved one more time, then turned and walked confidently towards school. No looking over her shoulder. No fear in her steps. Just a child going to learn the way every child should. Mu-jin watched until she disappeared inside. Then he returned to his car, where Jae-hoon waited. Ready for the meeting with the alliance? Jae-hoon asked. Yes, we have 17 other operations to dismantle. As they drove through Seoul's morning traffic, Mu-jin thought about the boy he'd been powerless, watching his sister disappear. About the man he'd become powerful, but hollow. And about the man he was becoming, someone who used power to protect rather than dominate. He'd lost territory, lost revenue, lost the respect of half Seoul's underworld. But he'd found something more valuable, purpose, redemption, the possibility that even monsters could choose to become human again. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. He opened it, expecting threats or demands. Instead, he found a simple message. Thank you for saving my daughter. She sleeps without nightmares now. You gave our family back its future. The Kims. Mu-jin stared at those words. He'd received gratitude before, from business partners, from subordinates, from people whose debts he'd erased. But this was different. This was a family thanking him for giving them what money couldn't buy. Safety, hope, tomorrow. Boss, Jae-hoon glanced over. You okay? Yeah, Mu-jin said quietly. For the first time in 25 years, I think I actually am. 6 months after that rainy night, when a 6-year-old girl asked the ghost of Seoul to walk her home, Mu-jin stood at his sister's grave. He visited monthly now, talking to Min-young about everything, the alliance, the children they'd saved, the empire he'd partially dismantled in pursuit of something more important. I couldn't save you, he said to the gravestone. I was too young, too weak, too powerless, and I spent 25 years making sure I'd never be powerless again. But in becoming powerful, I became exactly like the men who took you. Hollow, calculating, seeing people as assets or threats, never as humans. He placed flowers, white chrysanthemums, Min-young's favorites. Then Ah-reum appeared, 6 years old, terrified, alone, and she asked me to protect her, me, the most dangerous man in Seoul, because somehow she saw what I'd forgotten, that power without purpose is just violence. That strength means protecting the weak, not exploiting them. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves around the cemetery. I'm trying to be better, Min-young. Not good, maybe. I'm still a criminal, still make money in ways that aren't legal, still use violence when necessary. But I'm trying to make those choices matter. To use what I built for something beyond myself. He stood there in silence, feeling the weight of years lifting. Not forgiven, he'd never forgive himself for failing Min-young. But perhaps he was learning to carry that failure differently. Not as punishment, but as purpose. His phone rang. Jae-hoon. Boss, we found another operation, targeting children in Busan. Kim Min-woo's organization and ours are coordinating a raid tonight. I'll be there in 3 hours. He took one last look at Min-young's grave, then walked back toward his car. The ghost of Seoul, the man who'd built an empire on fear, the criminal who'd chosen to protect innocence regardless of cost. He'd never be a hero. The things he'd done, the blood on his hands, those were permanent stains. But maybe he didn't need to be a hero. Maybe he just needed to be someone who stood between monsters and children. Someone who remembered that the most important battles weren't fought for territory or profit, but for the right of 6-year-olds to walk to school without fear. As his Mercedes merged into Seoul's traffic, Mu-jin thought about Ah-reum, safe now, learning math and making friends and living the childhood her parents had died trying to give her. He thought about Min-jun and Soo-jin, and the dozens of other children recovered from trafficking operations across 12 countries. He thought about the alliance, 8 criminal organizations united by one principle. Some innocence was worth protecting, even if it cost everything. And he thought about the boy he'd been, the monster he'd become, and the man he was slowly learning to be. Seoul stretched out before him, millions of lights, millions of lives, millions of stories unfolding. And somewhere in that vast city, children slept safely in their beds. Not all of them. Not yet. But more than yesterday. More than last week. More than before one brave girl asked the most dangerous man in Seoul to make her feel safe. That would have to be enough. For now, it was more than enough. It was purpose. It was redemption. It was the beginning of becoming human again. And for Baek Mu-jin, the ghost of Seoul, that was worth every sacrifice, every enemy, every empire he'd had to burn down to build something better. Because in the end, power wasn't measured by territory controlled or fear commanded. It was measured by innocence protected and promises kept. By 6-year-olds who could walk to school without looking over their shoulders. By children who slept without nightmares. By a former monster who'd learned, finally, what it meant to be safe.